In this video, we're going to get an overview of Spring Security. So in this section, we'll actually learn how to secure a Spring MVC web application. We'll also develop login pages. We'll use the default and custom pages. We'll define users and roles with simple authentication. And we'll also protect URLs based on a given role. We'll also learn how to hide and show content based on the role. And finally, we'll learn how to store user passwords and roles in a database, plain text and encrypted.
Now we're looking for practical results here. We're going to cover the most common Spring Security tasks that you'll need on a daily basis. Now, this is not an A to Z reference. For that, you can see the Spring Security Reference Manual. I have a link here to the Love to Code website that'll simply redirect you to the official Spring Reference Manual. Let's look at the Spring Security model. Spring Security defines a framework for security. It's implemented using servlet filters in the background. You can make use of declarative security or programmatic security. Spring Security using servlet filters. Basically, servlet filters are used to pre-process and post-process the web request. These filters can route the web request based on security logic, and Spring provides a bulk of the security functionality with servlet filters. Let's take a look at Spring Security with some diagrams. You have a web browser on the left, and then on the right, you have this protected web resource like My Top Secret Stuff. The browser's attempting to access your top secret information and get the results. Now, this is where Spring Security comes into play. These Spring Security filters will intercept those requests, pre-process them, and then see if the user can actually access that protected resource. Spring Security will look at your application security configuration, and then it'll also look at the user's passwords and roles that are in your database to see if this user's authenticated and also if they're authorized to access this web resource. And this all happens in the background thanks to Spring Security. Okay, Spring Security in action with the flowchart. We have these Spring Security filters, and then basically we'll say, hey, is this web resource protected? Yes, then is this user authenticated? If they're not authenticated, then we'll send them to the login form. Show that login form and then take the user ID and password and authenticate it. We'll check to see if this user ID and password is valid based on the information we have stored in our system. Then if they pass the test, so they're authenticated, then we check, is this user authorized? Do they have authorization to access this resource? Now, just like at your job, right, you have a security badge, or at your university, you have a student ID that can get you into the main building. However, you may not be able to access all the rooms in the building. It all depends on your access level or your authorization role. Just because you have a good user ID and password, that doesn't mean you have access to everything. There's still additional levels of security in place, and Spring has support for this using security roles. If you don't have the given role, then it's say access denied. Or if you do have the given role, then it'll actually show you the resource and give you access to this secure site. Basically, the security here is in place to keep the bad guys out and also allow the good folks inside. This is pretty cool. I like it. Okay, so let's review some security concepts here. We have this idea of authentication that basically handles checking the user ID and password with the credentials that are stored in your app or in your database. And then we have the idea of authorization. Here we check to see if the user has an authorized role. As you can see, there are two levels of security that are in place for the Spring Security framework. Spring Security has declarative security. Here we define our application security constraints in a configuration. This is handled by an all Java config using a configuration class. And the nice thing about this is that it provides separation of concerns between application code and security code. And then there's also programmatic security. Basically, Spring provides an API for custom application coding. And this is where you can have greater customization for your specific application requirements. For real-world, real-time enterprise projects, you may say, hey, Spring Security gives me the basics. However, at my company, we have additional business rules or additional logic that we need to implement. Well, not a problem. You can easily extend the framework for doing that, and you can plug in your own custom security implementation. To enable Spring Security, The first thing we do is we edit the pom.xml file, and in this file, we'll add the dependency for the Spring Boot Starter security. And by adding this dependency, Spring Boot will automatically secure all endpoints for the application. No additional coding is required at this point. However, we'll learn about customizing the configuration a little bit later. And once we run our application and we access our app, then our application is secured. As a result, Spring Security will prompt us to log in. Now, by default, the username is user, and the generated password is in the application logs. Now, this is just for testing. Later on, we'll learn other techniques to customize the user ID and the password, including storing the information in the database. But at the moment, we're just looking at the defaults for right now.
Alrighty, now when you log into the application, there's different options on how you can log into your application. You can make use of HTTP basic authentication. There's also support for a default login form. So Spring will actually give you a default login form if you don't have one, which is pretty neat. And we'll see some examples of that in this class. And then you can also create your own custom login form where you can provide your own look and feel using whatever HTML and whatever CSS, JavaScript that you want. So here's an example of the basic authentication, and you may have seen this before. The web browser will simply pop up a dialog box, a modal dialog box. You have to go through and fill out username and password. It's ugly. I like to say blah because it's awful. You've probably seen this before. Good use of like lazy programmers. They didn't have the time to create their own form. We won't use this in the course, but I'm simply just telling you that Spring supports it if you'd like to use it. But blah. I don't like it. One really cool thing about Spring is that they'll actually give you a default login form that's based on HTML. So if you don't provide a login form, you can say, hey, Spring, go ahead and give me your default form. And it's really good for a quick start. I like to start out with it just to kind of make sure I have the security piece in place. And then I'll go through and I'll grab one of my HTML buddies and they'll make it look pretty for me. But at least I kind of have something to work with, something to start with. All right, so now you can also make use of your own custom login form. So basically, you can create your own HTML page using whatever cascading style sheet you want, JavaScript, Bootstrap, whatever. And you simply tell Spring, hey, this is the login form that you should use. And then Spring will actually display it. So you have full control over the look and feel. And so I like this. And we'll actually see examples of this in the class also. So this is great. You're not restricted or constrained to whatever Spring gives you. You can do whatever you want.